The story of economic growth that we've been telling, along with all of the illustrations, can seem like a magical fairy tale. Magical fairy tales should end with a happily ever after. But that's only when everything goes right. That's only when you don't have evil stepmothers or big bad wolves getting in the way. So what are the obstacles to economic growth that we have to pay attention to? Well, the first thing is, step one, saving. Remember, savings requires a sacrifice. We have to give up some of our current consumption so that we can be able to allocate resources toward investment. And that's difficult to do. We have to make sacrifices. Now, sometimes it's because we don't have an incentive for it. Maybe there can be government policies or events, cultural shifts in the norms. Whether it's policy or norm, if the incentives to save increase and people save more, that can lead us down the road to economic growth. Saving more by itself isn't enough. That savings has to get reallocated toward investment. So the problem is that some of the people who are in a position to be able to save more are not the same people who want to go out and buy capital goods. The farmer who wants to buy the tractor so his farm can be more productive doesn't have enough resources to make that investment. But there's a college professor saving for retirement who has no interest in buying a tractor, but they would like to see the money that they've saved grow. Well, financial markets play a critical role in getting money from the people who are saving and making sure that that gets allocated. It gets redirected toward and gets into the hands of the firms that want to buy the capital, physical or human capital, that can be used to increase our productive capacity. Financial markets, or what we sometimes call loanable funds markets, play a crucial role in getting the resources that have been saved by the college professor into the hands of the farmer who wants to buy a tractor. And when he gets that tractor, it increases his productivity and sets us on the path to economic growth. This very important role of financial markets can be supported when the government has policies that make financial markets, that establish financial markets and make them more effective. In developing countries, establishing financial markets and making sure that they function well can be a very important step toward economic development. So government policies that make financial markets more effective can help us in the process of economic growth. Financial markets do a fairly good job of getting money into the hands of those who want to purchase physical capital. But with other forms of capital, like human capital, getting money into the hands of students who want to get education and vocational training can be more difficult. Because when a student doesn't pay back the loan, there's nothing that the lender can take back. And so this makes lenders less inclined to give loans for the purchase of human capital. One of the policies that government can take is to try to provide some guarantee that that loan will get repaid. This allows lenders to have a little bit more confidence to make those kinds of loans. And we definitely see this in college education. But even before we get to college education, we have primary and secondary education. And the benefits are so widespread that the government policy can be to just simply finance that education. By doing so, whether it's public finance of primary and secondary education or guarantees on loans for higher education or vocational training, this can lead to the development of more human capital, which can lead us down the path of economic growth. One other form of investment that we've talked about is investing in new technologies through research and development. One of the problems there is there's a lot of uncertainty. And even if they do discover something, well, it's hard to maintain control of that if you don't have intellectual property rights. It's hard to earn back the money that you invested in the research and development in the first place. One of the policies that government can have is to protect intellectual property rights through patent protection. That kind of protection will encourage people, private individuals, to make those investments. The other thing that the government can do is to finance research itself. Some research leads to new discoveries that have such far-reaching effects and far-reaching benefits that we want everybody to have access to those. And the way to do that is have the government provide public finance of those research projects. So whether it's patent protection so that more private individuals invest in research and development projects, or whether the government publicly finances research, either way, when we get those new technologies, that increases our potential to produce goods and services. Another form of capital that we haven't talked about to this point is natural capital. Natural capital is the stock of natural resources in an economy. Every year we use up some of those resources and they're depleted. But every year Mother Nature helps out by replenishing some of those natural resources, the renewable resources, and we can also make purposeful investments in natural capital. Remember, planting a tree is a form of investment. Now, with natural capital, we often underinvest because the benefits to the individual that plants it sometimes aren't as much as the cost. But the benefits to society can be great. When the government has policies that reduce the rate at which our natural resources are depleted, or provide incentives and encourage investment in natural resources, increases in natural resources are another important part of our overall capital stock. Increasing that capital stock leads to economic growth. Besides looking at some policies that are intended to increase economic growth, we have to look at other policies, some policies that are designed to deal with short-run fluctuations in the economy. Fiscal and monetary policy that you've learned about. Well, those policies may address short-run conditions in the economy, they can have long-run impacts. They can affect the rate of economic growth. This is hugely important. Those policies will have an impact on interest rates. If interest rates go up, investment spending goes down. That means we're going to have less of an addition to the capital stock. Less of an addition to the capital stock means our economy is not going to grow as much. On the other hand, if interest rates go down, investment spending goes up. Hey, we saw that in our last video. That investment spending increase causes aggregate demand to shift to the right, which increases production, but not productive capacity, not yet. In the following year, once the new investments, the new machines, tools, and factories come online and we're able to use those for productive purposes, our capacity increases and the long-run aggregate supply shifts to the right. And don't forget, if the long-run aggregate supply shifts to the right, the PPC will shift away from the origin. So always keep in mind the different policies that could have an impact on economic growth. Now that we've looked at some of the obstacles to growth and some of the government policies to deal with those, and even some of the government policies that have perhaps an unintended effect on economic growth, we have to remember the end result. Because remember, the story of economic growth was supposed to end with a happily ever after. We've dealt with the evil stepmothers and the big bad wolves. What is that happily ever after? When we get an increase in our potential to produce goods and services, we're able to use that to enjoy a higher standard of living. We get more stuff, or we get the same amount of stuff and we get to enjoy more leisure and more recreation. Either way, we enjoy a higher standard of living. That's an important story. That's a story that we would like to see told all around the world, in every country and for every person. But as you think about the lessons of economic growth, don't think about them just in terms of the macroeconomy, but think about for yourself. Can you reallocate some of your time toward your studies? Save and invest? That way you get more human capital, and that human capital that you develop, that increases your capital stock, increases your productivity, and that leads to economic growth for you. That leads to your happily ever after.